It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when everything changed. The campus buzzed with the usual chatter, students rushing to class, others huddled in corners with coffee and laptops, dorm room doors swinging open with sleepy goodbyes. Among the crowd were two college friends, Marcus and Jayden, both sophomores at Hillside University. They were inseparable since freshman orientation. One loved history, the other was into engineering, and together, they balanced each other out like brothers. No one had any reason to believe that day would be their last on campus. By sunset, they were gone. Just like that. No signs of struggle, no messages, no trail. Their dorm room was untouched, backpacks still by their desks, half-finished energy drinks sitting on the windowsill, and Jayden's hoodie still hanging on the chair. At first, people assumed they skipped town or got into trouble, but those who knew them well knew something wasn't right. Marcus had a midterm the next morning, and Jayden had been planning his sister's birthday surprise for weeks. They wouldn't just disappear. The university launched an investigation. Police were called in. Flyers went up all over campus. Their parents begged for information on local news. Days turned to weeks. Weeks turned into months. The only clue, a security camera near the library caught a blurry image of them walking together toward the quad around 10:42 p.m. after grabbing snacks. After that, nothing. No pings from their phones. No credit card activity. They vanished into thin air. And then the story faded. Like so many others. 6 years passed. Until one day, something strange happened. A woman named Clarissa, a travel blogger who loved documenting hidden gems and oddities, was virtually scouting a small town hours from Hillside on Google Street View. She was trying to plan a detour route for her followers and randomly clicked on an old street corner near a closed-down bus terminal. What she saw made her freeze. There, in the corner of the image, almost hidden behind a rusted-out fence and broken billboard, stood two young men. One of them was wearing a college hoodie that hadn't been sold in years, a limited edition design that Jayden's sister had made for the university's Black Student Union. The face, the stance, the energy, it was him. And next to him, Marcus, unmistakably older, but still instantly recognizable. Clarissa didn't know the boys' names or their story, but something about the image felt off. The way they stood, almost like they were watching, waiting. She posted the screenshot online, just to ask if anyone recognized the place. Within 48 hours, it exploded. Someone from Hillside saw the post, recognized the hoodie, and then the pieces started falling into place. A news anchor picked up the trail, investigators reopened the case, and the hunt for Marcus and Jayden reignited. But the question remained, why were they there? And why hadn't they come home? While that story began to resurface, across town, a completely different moment was unfolding, seemingly unrelated, but destined to change everything. It happened on a city bus. A regular route. A regular afternoon. A black teenager named Elijah, wearing headphones and scrolling through music, noticed a pregnant woman board the bus, looking flustered and exhausted. Without hesitation, Elijah stood and offered her a seat. She gave him a quick thank you and sat down. The moment was simple, quiet, almost forgettable, until the woman reached into her bag, scribbled something on a piece of paper, and handed it to Elijah as she got off at the next stop. That note changed everything. At first, Elijah thought it was just a polite thank you. But when he unfolded it, the words inside made his hands tremble. It wasn't just a note of gratitude. It was a message, a plea, and a warning. Something about missing boys. A place. A symbol. A name he had never heard before but would soon never forget. Find the gate behind the old depot. They're still there. How did this woman know about Marcus and Jayden? Was it just a coincidence? Or was Elijah now pulled into something far bigger than he ever imagined? With one kind act, a new chapter began. One that would unravel secrets long buried and force people to face truths they tried to forget. What happened to the two college boys that night 6 years ago? Who was the woman with the note? And what had Google Street View accidentally revealed that someone didn't want anyone to see? The answers were closer than anyone thought, but the deeper Elijah looked, the more dangerous the truth became. And not everyone wanted it uncovered. Elijah couldn't stop staring at the note. He read it over and over again, trying to make sense of the strange message written in shaky handwriting. Asterisk, find the gate, behind the old depot. They're still there. Asterisk, his heart thudded louder each time he repeated it to himself. Who was they? And why would a pregnant woman hand him this message out of nowhere? He didn't know her. Had never seen her before. It wasn't some random scrawl, either. It felt personal. Urgent. Like she had been waiting for someone to give it to. And she chose him. That bus ride kept replaying in his head. Her tired eyes, the way she kept looking over her shoulder, like someone was watching. Elijah hadn't thought much of it at first, but now, every little detail suddenly mattered. Was she in trouble? Was someone following her? And what did this have to do with missing boys? That night, Elijah couldn't sleep. He kept the note on his nightstand, the folded paper glowing under the streetlight outside his bedroom window. He tried searching Old Depot near Hillside online, but nothing came up that made sense. The city had dozens of abandoned places. Warehouses, terminals, storage yards. Any one of them could be the spot she meant. But the word gate stuck with him. It didn't feel random. It felt like a clue. A specific one. Meanwhile, the post by Clarissa continued spreading. Internet sleuths and amateur detectives began breaking down the screenshot, the location, the shadows, the fencing. Some claimed it was photoshopped. Others said it matched an old bus terminal near the edge of a forgotten industrial zone, shut down after a fire nearly a decade ago. But the chilling part? When someone tried to check the location again on Google Street View, the image was gone, replaced by a blank road shot, with the entire section blurred out. People began asking, why was it removed? Who requested it? And if those were Marcus and Jayden in the picture, why were they just standing there, staring into nothing? Back at Hillside, some of their old classmates, now older and scattered across the country, were dragged back into the conversation. Memories resurfaced. People started sharing things they had kept to themselves, little oddities. Like how Jayden had confided in a friend just weeks before he disappeared that he felt like someone had been following him after night classes. Or how Marcus once joked about a weird guy watching them from across the dining hall, always wearing the same coat, always pretending to read the newspaper.
Nobody had thought much of it then.
College students joked about creepy stuff all the time. But now it all felt different. Too many things were clicking. Elijah didn't know Marcus or Jayden. He was only 12 when they vanished. But something deep in his gut told him the note he got and the mystery unraveling online were connected. Still, he didn't tell anyone. Not his friends. Not his mom. Not even his cousin Malik, who he told everything to. Instead, he started asking quiet questions. He began riding the bus more often, hoping to run into the woman again. He memorized her face, even though he'd only seen it once. Her expression was burned into his mind, a mix of fear, sadness, and relief. He started hanging around the old neighborhoods near the edge of the city, where forgotten buildings sagged behind tall fences and signs warned of trespassing. He took pictures, notes, anything that felt off. And then one afternoon he saw something strange. It was near an old rail depot, hidden behind a scrapyard. A rusted-out gate stood half open. The lock snapped clean off like someone forced it. Vines curled around the fence, and broken glass glittered in the dirt. There was a symbol scratched into the metal gate, a rough, crooked circle with an X through it. Elijah didn't know what it meant, but he snapped a picture anyway. Something about it made him stop breathing for a second. The silence around that place was thick, heavy. He didn't go in.
Not yet.
He needed more answers. That night, Elijah took a chance. He messaged Clarissa. At first, he didn't think she'd reply. She had thousands of followers now, and her inbox was probably full of spam. But to his surprise, she answered in less than 10 minutes. Maybe it was the photo he attached, the scratch symbol on the gate, or maybe it was something in the way he worded his message. I think I found something you need to see. Clarissa was cautious but intrigued. They started exchanging messages. Elijah told her about the note. Left out a few things, but enough to get her attention. She told him what she knew about the photo, the possible location, and how she'd been trying to go there in person but got strange pushback. Emails went unanswered. A local land survey office claimed there was no record of the terminals she had identified. Even the street view history for that area had been wiped. The deeper they looked, the stranger things became. Another person online claimed they saw Marcus months after he vanished, walking down a dirt road barefoot, mumbling to himself. But when they circled back with help, he was gone. Someone else said they saw Jayden in a fast food place late one night. He looked older, thinner, and his eyes were empty, like he wasn't all there. But no security footage ever turned up, and none of the sightings were confirmed. Still, the stories were stacking up. Elijah now felt like he was part of something far beyond what he could have imagined. He was just a teenager trying to be kind on a bus. But that one moment, giving up his seat, had cracked open a door to something much bigger. Something dark. Something hidden. He didn't know why the woman gave him the note. Maybe she had seen something and couldn't say it out loud. Maybe she was trying to right a wrong. Or maybe she knew that the right person would listen. Now Elijah had a decision to make. He could walk away. Pretend it never happened. Go back to school. Back to regular life. And ignore the gnawing feeling in his chest. Or he could keep digging. But one thing was becoming clear. If he chose to move forward, there was no turning back. And somewhere behind that broken gate, answers were waiting. But so were the secrets someone had worked hard to bury. Elijah knew he couldn't do this alone. After a few sleepless nights and unanswered texts to the number on the note, which only led to a disconnected line, he finally told Malik. His cousin was older by a few years, worked part-time at a local auto shop, and was always the one Elijah turned to when things got real. At first, Malik thought Elijah was messing with him. A mystery note from a stranger? Missing college kids? Google Street View? It sounded wild. But once Elijah showed him the picture of the gate, the symbol, and the message the woman left, Malik's face changed. He leaned in, silent, reading the words like they held more than just meaning, like they held a warning. They started driving around together on weekends, slowly circling the outskirts of the city. Malik had a beat-up Toyota with one working speaker and a trunk full of tools, which turned out useful when they needed to pop open an old fence or move through back roads most people avoided. They didn't tell anyone what they were doing, not their families, not their friends.
It was better that way.
But as they dug deeper, strange things started happening. One day, Elijah came home to find his backpack unzipped on his bed. Nothing was missing, but everything inside had been moved around, like someone was looking for something. Another time, he noticed a black car parked across the street, engine running, no driver visible. It was gone before he could get a good look. Malik joked that Elijah was getting paranoid, but even he started double-checking the locks at night. Meanwhile, Clarissa continued to investigate on her own. She had followers sending in tips, grainy photos, old maps, rumors from forums about secret tunnels under Hillside, places where students went and never came back. She shared what she could with Elijah, but something about this case made her cautious. She told him not to trust everyone. Sometimes, she wrote, the people who want the truth the most are the ones trying hardest to bury it. Then came the video. It was sent anonymously to Clarissa's inbox, with no subject, no explanation. The quality was poor, like it had been recorded on an old camcorder, and the audio crackled in and out. But what it showed stopped Elijah cold. Two boys, tied to chairs in a dimly lit room. One of them looked up at the camera, and even through the pixelated blur, Elijah recognized the face. Jayden, eyes swollen, blood on his shirt. In the background, a figure moved past the camera, only visible for a split second. The timestamp on the corner read, "For years ago." Clarissa didn't post the video publicly. She said it was too dangerous. But she let Elijah and Malik watch it through a secure link, and ever since, they'd been stuck between fear and frustration. Why didn't the police have this? Who filmed it? And how are these boys still alive after all this time? Malik started asking around the shop, casually bringing up the old bus depot in conversations, trying to fish for stories. One of the older mechanics, Mr. Avery, said something strange one day over lunch. He told them that years ago, there were rumors about that area being used for special programs, government testing, or military training or something. But he didn't know details. Just that trucks used to come and go late at night, and people stopped asking questions after a while. When Malik pushed for more, Mr. Avery clammed up and changed the subject. At the same time, Elijah kept thinking about the woman on the bus. What was her role in all of this? Why hadn't she come forward? And if she knew enough to write that note, was she in danger too? Then something unexpected happened. A girl named Liana reached out to Clarissa through a private message. She said she used to live in the dorm room next to Marcus and Jayden. She'd kept quiet all these years because she was afraid, but the recent attention stirred up memories she couldn't ignore anymore. In a late-night call with Clarissa, which Elijah later listened to, Liana said she remembered seeing someone the night the boys vanished. A man in a campus security jacket, except there was something off about it. No badge. No radio. And he didn't speak. Just nodded at her and walked into Marcus and Jayden's hall. She didn't see him again. Campus police denied any knowledge of such a person. Liana also mentioned a basement under the dorms that was rarely used. Old storage, supposedly sealed off. But sometimes late at night, she swore she heard noises coming from below. Not rats or pipes, but voices. Then, days before the boys disappeared, she saw Marcus staring out his window for hours, like he was waiting for something. Or someone. The deeper they got, the more it felt like the school itself was hiding something. Old security footage was missing. Visitor logs were gone. Even some of the RA records from that semester had been accidentally deleted. Elijah began to realize this wasn't just a mystery about two missing students. It was about what they had discovered before they vanished. He and Malik returned to the gate behind the depot one evening just before sundown. The area was quiet, except for the wind and the creak of the metal fence. Malik had brought bolt cutters, and together they pushed the gate open just enough to squeeze through. On the other side was a field of cracked concrete, scattered with rusted machinery and broken glass. In the center stood a long, low building, windows blacked out, doors chained shut. But someone had been there recently. Fresh footprints in the dust. Cigarette butts near the steps. A plastic bottle of water, half full, still cold. They didn't go inside that night. They weren't ready. But now they knew this place wasn't forgotten. Someone was still using it, watching it, protecting whatever was inside. And as Elijah stood there in the fading light, holding the note that had started it all, he felt the weight of what they were getting into. This wasn't just about kindness anymore. It was about truth. About uncovering something buried so deep, someone had gone to great lengths to make sure it stayed hidden. He didn't know what they'd find behind that door. But the truth was calling. And it was getting louder. The air behind the depot felt different. Heavier, like it was holding its breath. Elijah stood frozen just inside the gate, listening to the silence press in from all sides. Malik whispered something, but Elijah didn't hear him. His eyes were locked on the long building ahead, the one with the blacked-out windows and chained doors. There was something about it, a feeling he couldn't shake, like someone was watching them from inside. They didn't speak as they crept across the cracked concrete yard, the crunch of gravel underfoot sounding too loud. Every few steps, Elijah looked over his shoulder, half expecting headlights to flash on or a voice to boom from a speaker telling them to freeze. But nothing happened. Just the wind brushing against the rusted fence and the distant hum of traffic far beyond the trees. When they reached the door, Malik pulled the bolt cutters from his backpack. Elijah held the flashlight steady, the beam shaking slightly in his hand. The chain snapped with a metallic clink, louder than either of them liked. For a long second, they stood frozen again, waiting. Still nothing. Malik slowly reached for the handle and pushed the door open. It groaned. Inside, it was pitch dark. The smell of old wood, metal, and something else, something musty and sour, hit them instantly. Elijah swept the flashlight around. The room was empty except for rows of broken chairs, dusty crates, and a narrow hallway leading deeper into the building. The walls were covered in peeling paint and faded safety posters, some of them so old the faces were blurred. One poster near the hallway had a small symbol scribbled in red, a circle with an X. The same one Elijah had seen on the gate. As they moved deeper, The silence became more intense. Every breath, every footstep, seemed like it echoed forever. They passed through a room that looked like it used to be some kind of office. Desks overturned, file cabinets broken open. Most papers were missing, but Malik found a small stack tucked in a drawer. He stuffed it into his backpack without reading them. Then they heard it, a soft shuffle, like someone dragging their foot across the floor. Elijah turned off the flashlight. Both of them stood completely still. The sound came again. Not close, but not far either. A slow, deliberate movement, followed by a short cough. Someone was inside. They crouched behind an overturned desk, barely breathing. Elijah's heart was hammering so hard he thought it might give them away. Malik reached into his bag and pulled out a pocket knife. It wasn't much, but it made Elijah feel a little safer. The footsteps got closer, then stopped. For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing. Then came the voice.
Low. Come.
Just a few words. You shouldn't be here. Elijah's blood went cold. The voice wasn't angry. It was sad, almost tired. Malik grabbed Elijah's sleeve, silently signaling to move. They crawled along the wall, then slipped through a broken door into another hallway. This one had no lights, no windows. Only doors on either side, some closed, others barely hanging on their hinges. They opened one. Inside was a small room with a single chair and chains bolted to the wall. The chains weren't old. Elijah's knees almost gave out. This wasn't just an abandoned building. It had been used recently, and not for anything normal. The chair had scratch marks along the arms, and the floor below was stained dark. Malik grabbed Elijah's arm and pulled him back into the hallway. We need to go, Malik whispered.
Now.
But Elijah shook his head. Not yet. Just a little further. He couldn't explain it. Something inside him said the answer was close. That if they left now, they'd miss everything. He followed the hallway to the very end, where a thick metal door stood slightly open. Light leaked from the gap, a pale, flickering kind like from an old TV. Elijah pushed it open. Inside was a large room with rows of filing cabinets, boxes, and a giant corkboard covered in photographs. Faces. Maps. Names. Red string connected some of them, like in movies about secret operations. Elijah stepped closer and felt the ground shift beneath his feet, a trapdoor. Malik found the handle and pulled it up slowly. Below was a narrow staircase leading into total darkness. And just before they decided what to do, they heard it again. The dragging footsteps. But this time, there were more of them. Multiple. Coming from all directions. Malik dropped the trapdoor closed and backed toward the filing cabinets. Elijah scanned the photos on the board and froze when he saw one of Jayden. Not a school photo, a recent one. Older. Thinner. A date scribbled in the corner, 9 months ago.
Who had taken that?
And why was it here? Suddenly, the lights flickered and cut out completely. The building was now dead silent. Malik grabbed Elijah's arm. We have to hide. They ducked behind a row of crates just as the door creaked open again. Soft footsteps entered the room. A flashlight beam skimmed across the wall. Then across the photos. Then toward the crates. Elijah held his breath. A figure stepped into view. Dressed in black, face obscured by a mask. They stopped in front of the corkboard, then slowly turned their head, as if sensing something nearby. The beam of light swept inches from Elijah's shoe. Then it paused. Elijah closed his eyes, heart racing. But then the beam moved on. The figure stepped away into the hallway and vanished. For a moment, all they could do was sit there in the dark, trying not to make a sound. Finally, Malik whispered, "We've seen enough. We're not ready for this." Elijah nodded. He didn't want to admit it, but they needed help. Real help. They quietly slipped back out the way they came, moving fast but silent, ducking shadows and jumping at every creak. By the time they reached the outside gate, the night had fallen thick and cold. The wind was stronger now, and the distant sound of sirens echoed faintly. Back in the car, Malik started the engine with shaky hands. Elijah looked down at his phone. One new message. From a blocked number. It read, * leave it alone. This isn't your story, *. But Elijah knew they were wrong. It was his story now. And he wasn't backing down. Elijah stared at the message on a screen, his fingers trembling slightly. * leave it alone. This isn't your story. * the words felt like ice in his chest. Whoever sent it had been watching them, not just tonight, but for a while. That wasn't the kind of warning someone sends randomly. They knew about the building, the files, the photo of Jayden, everything. But before Elijah could say anything, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo. Grainy. Taken from what looked like a rooftop, angled down at a familiar street. His street. In the center of the image, just outside his apartment complex, was a small figure. Him. Wearing the same hoodie he had on now. The photo had been taken minutes ago. Malik saw it over his shoulder and immediately hit the gas. We're being followed, he said under his breath, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. The roads were quiet, but the feeling of being watched stuck to their skin like sweat. Elijah couldn't stop looking at that photo. If they'd been seen outside that building, if someone was tracking them this closely, what did that mean for Clarissa? He tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. Texted. No reply. Malik swung a hard left and pulled into a parking garage a few blocks from the bus depot. They ditched the car on the second level and headed down the stairwell on foot. Malik said it'd be harder to track them that way. Elijah wasn't so sure, but it was better than doing nothing. They needed to get to Clarissa. As they hurried through the dim streets, Elijah's mind raced. That photo of Jayden from 9 months ago, it meant he might still be alive. That he'd been moved, watched, kept. And whoever was behind all of this wasn't just erasing evidence or hiding the past. They were still active, still making moves. Still dangerous. They reached Clarissa's apartment just after midnight. The lights were off, but her bike was chained out front like always. Elijah banged on the door softly at first, then harder. No answer. He called out her name. Still nothing. Then he saw it. The door was cracked open. Malik pushed him back and stepped in first, flashlight out. The apartment was a mess. Not ransacked, but clearly left in a hurry. A laptop sat open on the desk, still running. A cup of tea had gone cold beside it. On the wall above her monitor were maps, notes, screenshots, all pinned up in a messy but deliberate pattern. But no Clarissa. Elijah walked over to her desk. A chat window was still open. The last message she sent had a file attached. A voice recording. He hit play. Static at first. Then Clarissa's voice came through, urgent, shaky. If something happens to me, tell Elijah. Tell him to look in the archived news from 1998. Hillside University. It's buried, but it's there. Start with the fire. That's where this really began. And Elijah, if you're listening, they're watching you too. I shouldn't have. Then silence. Elijah looked at Malik. The fire? He had never heard anything about a fire. Not in any of the articles he read. Not even in the forums. Malik started snapping pictures of the wall. This whole thing goes deeper than we thought, he said. Way deeper. Just then, they heard a noise outside. Car doors. Footsteps. Voices. Not loud, coordinated. Organized. Malik grabbed Elijah's arm. We're not safe here. They bolted out the back of the building just as a black SUV pulled up out front. Two figures stepped out, both in dark clothes, one with a radio clipped to his collar. They moved straight to the front door, no hesitation. Like they'd been here before. Elijah and Malik ducked into a side alley and kept moving. They didn't stop until they were 6 blocks away, breathless and drenched in sweat. Elijah couldn't stop thinking about Clarissa. Where was she now? Had they taken her? Was she hiding? And what was she talking about? The fire in 1998? That night, they went to Malik's place instead of heading home. It felt safer. Less expected. While Malik kept watch near the window, Elijah pulled out his laptop and started digging. Local archives. Old news reports. Anything tied to Hillside University and the year 1998. At first, there was nothing. Then, buried under an obscure PDF from a digital library, he found it. Asterisk, tragedy strikes Hillside. Fire destroys psychology annex. 3 dead, cause undetermined. Asterisk, it was a short article. Basic. A student, a professor, and a janitor had all been killed when a late-night fire tore through the old psychology annex on the west end of campus. The report claimed faulty wiring. But what stood out was a single line at the end. Asterisk, authorities confirmed that select research files were removed before the fire. FBI presence at the scene remains unexplained. Asterisk, Elijah's breath caught. FBI? Why would federal agents be involved in a dorm fire? He found another piece, a forum thread from years ago. Someone claiming to be a former Hillside student posted about weird experiments being run out of that annex, behavioral trials, memory testing, something called phase echo. But the post ended abruptly, and the user never responded to follow-up comments. Elijah's head spun. What if Marcus and Jayden had stumbled across something related to that research? What if the people behind those experiments never really left? Malik looked over his shoulder. They've been covering this up for decades, he said quietly. Whatever happened back then, it didn't stop. It just changed locations. That's when Elijah remembered the trapdoor. They hadn't gone down. What if that was the key? What if that's where they were keeping people? Or whatever records were too dangerous to leave above ground? He stood up. We're going back. Malik looked at him like he was crazy. Elijah, they know who we are now. I don't care, Elijah said, voice hard. Jayden might still be alive. So might Marcus. And Clarissa risked everything. I'm not stopping until I find out what's under that building. Malik hesitated, then nodded slowly. Then we go tomorrow, before they move whatever's down there. That night, neither of them slept. And in the darkness, somewhere far away, a door opened, and a hand dragged something or someone back into the shadows. The next evening, just as the sun dipped below the skyline and shadows crept long across the pavement, Elijah and Malik stood once again in front of the fenced-off depot. The place looked exactly the same, quiet and still, like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. This time, they knew what they were walking into. Or at least they thought they did. With gloves on and faces covered, they moved quickly. The chain on the gate had been replaced, thicker and newer, but Malik had brought better cutters. Within seconds, they were through. They slipped around the side, past the broken crates, past the dusty chairs, and into the hallway where the trapdoor waited beneath layers of dust and silence. No sign of the masked figure. No flashlight beam. Just silence. Elijah pulled the trapdoor open. The air that rose from below was colder than he expected, and thick, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. Malik shone the light down the narrow stairwell, concrete steps, steep and worn. They didn't speak as they descended. The flashlight flickered once, but held steady. At the bottom, they found themselves in a long underground tunnel, narrower than a hallway, walls made of old stone and lined with pipes. The sound of dripping water echoed ahead. They followed the path in silence, turning corners that felt tighter each time, until they reached a heavy steel door, slightly ajar. Elijah pushed it open, and what they saw stopped them cold. A large underground room, sterile and brightly lit, like some kind of hidden lab. Computers lined the walls. In the center were 3 hospital-style beds. 2 were empty. The third wasn't. A man lay there,
Thin. Pale.
hooked to wires and monitors. It was Jayden. Elijah rushed forward, tears welling in his eyes. Jayden, he said, shaking his shoulder. Jayden's eyes fluttered, then opened slowly, unfocused. Elijah, he whispered, voice hoarse and dry. Malik scanned the room, looking for signs of anyone else. There were papers scattered across a desk nearby. Files.
Charts.
One folder read, Subject 03, Phase Echo Retention Failure. Another one read, Asterisk Marcus L, Reassigned 2021. Status. Unstable, asterisk. Elijah gently unhooked the wires from Jayden, careful not to trigger any alarms. We're getting you out of here, he said. Jayden tried to sit up but winced in pain. They moved Marcus somewhere else. I heard them say he was showing signs they didn't expect, that he was changing. Changing how? Malik asked, eyes narrowing. But before Jayden could answer, the lights in the room flickered. Then went out. Only the flashlight in Malik's hand lit the room now. The silence returned, thick and heavy. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Multiple. Elijah, Malik said. We don't have time. Elijah helped Jayden to his feet, wrapping one of Jayden's arms over his shoulder. Together, they moved toward the exit, the sound of approaching footsteps growing louder behind them. They barely made it through the steel door before someone shouted, "Stop." Malik slammed the door shut and wedged a metal rod through the handle. They ran through the tunnel, the beam from the flashlight bouncing off the walls. Behind them, a loud bang echoed, the sound of the steel door being struck from the other side. When they reached the stairwell, they were gasping for breath. Jayden stumbled, nearly falling, but Malik caught him. They made it to the surface just as another car pulled into the depot, not an SUV this time, but an unmarked white van. Its headlights caught them for a second, then the van swerved to block their path. The doors flung open. Clarissa stepped out, bruised, eyes wide, breathing hard.
Get in. Now.
They didn't hesitate. Malik helped Jayden into the back, while Elijah jumped into the passenger seat. Clarissa slammed the gas pedal and the van peeled off just as two figures in dark clothing sprinted out of the depot behind them. Inside the van, Clarissa explained. They held me for 2 days. Tried to scare me off. I escaped when they moved locations last night. I figured if you were smart, you'd come back today. Jayden was still weak, but awake now. They've been experimenting on people like us, gifted students. People they thought wouldn't be missed. Some kind of behavioral trial that started back in the 90s. The fire at Hillside was a cover-up. One of the subjects lost control. That's when they went underground. And Marcus? Elijah asked. Jayden paused, a strange look in his eyes. They said he was changing, that his memory wasn't being erased like the others. He remembered everything. Clarissa turned to Elijah, a dark seriousness in her face. There's something else you need to know. She handed him a photo, a security still from inside the lab. It showed Marcus, restrained, wide-eyed. But behind him was Elijah. Confused, he stared at it. That's not me. I was never. That photo's dated 2022, Clarissa said. It was taken a year ago. But you don't remember it, do you? Elijah felt his throat tighten. No, I don't. Because maybe, she said slowly, you were part of it too. Maybe you were one of them. Maybe you escaped and forgot. Or were made to forget. Jayden looked at him, expression unreadable. You were there, Elijah. I remember. Elijah's hands trembled. Memories flickered, quick flashes. A cold metal bed. Bright lights. Voices telling him to sleep. Screams echoing in the dark. A fire alarm. He looked up at Clarissa. Why didn't I remember any of it? She hesitated, then said, because they don't just erase memories. They rewrite them. The van sped into the night, but now, even though they had escaped, the truth felt heavier than anything they'd left behind. And somewhere, deep in another underground room, another file was quietly updated. Subject 07, Elijah T. Status. Reactivated. The van rolled down a quiet back road, headlights barely cutting through the fog settling over the pavement. Elijah sat in silence, staring out the window, though he wasn't really seeing anything. His mind was spinning, trying to piece together what was real and what had been planted. The idea that his memories weren't entirely his own, that some part of his life had been controlled or erased, it didn't feel possible. But Jayden's voice, Clarissa's evidence, and those fragments in his mind, they told a different story. Jayden leaned back against the wall of the van, still pale, but stronger than before. I used to think I was going crazy, he said quietly. Waking up and remembering things no one else did. Conversations that never happened, moments that felt like déjà vu but weren't. They'd call it corrections. Told me I was misremembering. But I wasn't. Malik drove in silence, focused but tense. Clarissa sat beside him, flipping through more documents she'd taken during her escape. One file in particular caught her attention, a thick, worn folder labeled Phase Echo, Termination Protocols. Her expression darkened as she flipped through the pages. These weren't just tests, she said, her voice low. They were grooming people, training them. For what, I don't know, but they had categories, classifications. Compliant, resistant, and rogue. She looked at Elijah. You were listed under resistant. That's probably why they tried to erase you instead of use you. Elijah finally turned away from the window. So what now? We just run? Hide forever? No, Malik said, his voice steady. Now we expose them. The rest of the night was a blur of movement. They found a safe place to rest, an old safe house Clarissa knew through a whistleblower network. Inside, Jayden slept deeply for the first time in months, his body finally free of the sedatives they'd kept him on. Elijah spent hours reading through the files, finding names, dates, places. Many of the missing students that had once been rumors on campus message boards were now confirmed. The photos, the logs, the failed experiments, it was all real. By morning, Clarissa had already drafted a full report and sent encrypted copies to trusted journalists, activist groups, and a few former faculty whistleblowers who had tried to speak up years ago. The evidence was overwhelming, too big to bury this time. Within days, the story broke. Secret experiments on college students uncovered. Former subjects speak out. The headlines swept across the internet. Photos of the abandoned facility. Interview clips from Jayden, weak but determined. Leaked reports showing government contracts tied to obscure behavior modification trials dating back over 20 years. Hillside University's name became a trending topic, but not for any of the reasons it used to be known. Former students began coming forward. People who dropped out under mysterious circumstances. Others who had suffered from memory loss, anxiety, or unexplained psychological symptoms. The puzzle pieces began fitting together, and for once, the truth had nowhere left to hide. But even as the public outcry grew louder, there was no satisfaction in it for Elijah. Too many questions still haunted him. Who had started the program? Why him? What did they try to make him forget? One night, about a week after the story went viral, Elijah sat alone in Clarissa's kitchen, flipping through one last file she hadn't yet opened. Inside, there was a personal log, handwritten, belonging to someone named Dr. Evelyn Shore. The same name from the old forum post. She'd been one of the lead researchers in the original Hillside psychology program, the one that had burned down in 1998. Her notes were chilling. Subject 07 shows resistance to phase echo. Unwilling to adopt implanted memories. Displays moral conflict. Attempts to intervene in trials involving subject 03. Recommendation: remove and reprogram or terminate. Subject 03. That was Jayden. The next page was even more disturbing. Termination postponed. Field researcher believes subject May 7th be valuable. Last known behavior suggests a psychological split. Subject believes he was never part of trial. Success. Memory implant stable for now. Elijah dropped the folder. They had made him forget not just what he'd seen but who he was. They had turned him into a stranger to protect their project. And for years, he'd lived under a false sense of reality, never knowing he was once willing to fight back. That realization hit harder than any headline or breaking story. He told Clarissa everything. She didn't try to fix it. She just sat there with him, listening. That was enough. Weeks passed. Investigations were launched. Hillside faced lawsuits. The facility under the bus depot was sealed by authorities, though rumors said the files that mattered were already gone. Some claimed high-level figures were still pulling strings behind the scenes. Others said the program was much bigger than just Hillside. But Elijah didn't chase those leads. He stayed close to Jayden, who was slowly recovering. Clarissa kept working with journalists and survivors, helping more stories come to light. Malik returned to his community group and started mentoring young students, helping them find direction without fear. As for Elijah, he began writing. Not about what they did to him, but about what it means to reclaim your story. About healing. About how truth isn't always immediate and how memory, even when tampered with, still finds a way to speak. His blog quietly grew, and soon, people who had once felt invisible started reaching out. One morning, he received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed him and Jayden side by side in the university courtyard, smiling. It was real, dated years ago. On the back, one sentence was written. Asterisk, the truth never disappears. It waits. Asterisk. Elijah stared at it for a long time, the morning sun pouring through the window. Whatever came next, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't afraid anymore. And he would never forget again. Not himself. Not Jayden. Not the others. And not the truth.